The night Jacob wrestled with God. A man stood alone beside a river in the middle of the night. He was waiting for the brother who had once wanted to kill him. His family had crossed the water. His possessions were gone from the camp. There was nowhere left to hide. Then someone attacked him in the darkness. Jacob wrestled with the stranger until sunrise. Neither man let go. Then the stranger touched Jacob's hip and dislocated it instantly. Jacob was injured, exhausted, still afraid. But he wrapped himself around the one who wounded him and said, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." By morning, Jacob had a new name. He also had a permanent limp. This is one of the Bible's strangest encounters. Was Jacob fighting a man? An angel? A visible manifestation of God? The text preserves the mystery. But the meaning is clear. Jacob entered the night trying to control everything. He left the night changed by the one he could not control. To understand the wrestling match, we need to understand Jacob. Even before he was born, Jacob was struggling with his twin brother Esau. Genesis says the children wrestled inside their mother's womb. Esau was born first. Jacob came out holding Esau's heel. His name became connected to the idea of grasping the heel, overtaking, or supplanting. And that became the pattern of his life. Jacob wanted blessing, but he often tried to obtain it through manipulation. He persuaded a hungry Esau to trade his birthright for food. Later, he disguised himself as Esau and deceived their father Isaac. Jacob wore his brother's clothes. He covered his hands with animal skins so they would feel hairy like Esau's. He entered his blind father's tent and claimed to be someone he was not. Isaac gave Jacob the blessing intended for Esau. When Esau discovered what happened, he was furious. He planned to kill Jacob. So Jacob ran. Years passed. Jacob built a family and accumulated wealth. But eventually, God told him to return home. Returning meant facing Esau, the brother he deceived, the brother whose identity he stole, the brother whose anger had once forced him into exile. Jacob sent messengers ahead. They returned with alarming news. Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men. Genesis chapter 32, verse 7 says, "Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed." Jacob began planning. He divided his people and possessions into groups. If Esau attacked one camp, perhaps the other could escape. Jacob prayed. He reminded God of his promises. He admitted that he was not worthy of the mercy he had received. Then Jacob prepared an enormous gift for Esau: goats, sheep, camels, cattle, donkeys. He separated the animals into groups and sent them ahead one by one. The strategy was designed to soften Esau's anger before Jacob appeared. Even after praying, Jacob continued arranging every possible outcome. That is painfully human. We ask God for help, then continue pulling every lever we can reach. Prayer and anxiety occupy the same room. Faith speaks. Fear checks the locks again. That night, Jacob sent his wives, children, and possessions across the river Jabbok. Genesis chapter 32, verse 24 says, "And Jacob was left alone." Those words set the stage. Jacob had spent his life managing people and circumstances. Now everyone was gone. No servants, no family, no gifts to send ahead, no disguise, no one to negotiate with. Alone in the dark, Jacob encountered a man. Genesis chapter 32, verse 24 continues, "And there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day." The text does not explain how the fight began. The stranger appears. The struggle starts, and it lasts all night. Jacob had wrestled metaphorically his entire life. With Esau, with his father-in-law Laban, with the consequences of his own choices. Now the struggle becomes physical. Hours pass. Dust rises, bodies collide, the river moves nearby, the darkness slowly begins to weaken. Genesis chapter 32, verse 25 says, "And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh." The stranger touches Jacob's hip, and the joint is thrown out of place. That single touch reveals the truth. Jacob was never fighting an equal opponent. The stranger allowed the wrestling to continue. The one who could disable Jacob with a touch was not struggling because he lacked power. The knight was accomplishing something inside Jacob. Jacob's strength failed. His hip gave way. But Jacob did not release him. The struggle changed. At first, Jacob may have fought to win. Now he held on because he could not stand alone. That is a powerful transformation. Sometimes we begin by fighting God, fighting the truth, fighting change, fighting the limits we do not want to accept. Then something breaks. Our strength runs out. And the arms that were pushing away become arms holding on. The stranger says, "Let me go, for the day breaketh." Jacob responds, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." Jacob had wanted blessing his entire life. He obtained the birthright through negotiation. He obtained Isaac's blessing through deception. He built wealth through strategy. But now he cannot disguise himself. He cannot bargain from a position of strength. He can only cling. Then the stranger asks, "What is thy name?" Jacob knew his name. The stranger knew it too. The question was not searching for information. It forced Jacob to identify himself. Years earlier, his father Isaac asked who he was. Jacob lied. He said, "I am Esau." Now, in the darkness, the question comes again, "What is thy name?" This time, Jacob tells the truth. Jacob, the heel grabber, the supplanter, the man who reaches for blessing through control, the man who pretended to be someone else. Transformation begins where disguise ends. The stranger says, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel." The name Israel is connected to striving with God. Jacob's identity changes. He entered the night defined by grasping. He leaves marked by encounter. Jacob asks the stranger for his name. The stranger does not answer directly. Instead, he blesses Jacob. Genesis chapter 32 verse 30 says, "And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." The prophet Hosea later describes Jacob as wrestling with an angel. Genesis speaks of a man. Jacob says he encountered God. The mystery is part of the story. Jacob met God in a form that allowed him to wrestle, survive, and be changed. Then the sun rises. Genesis chapter 32 verse 31 says, "And as he passed over Penuel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh." Jacob walks into the morning with a limp. The blessing did not erase the injury. The encounter left a mark. That is not the kind of ending people usually expect. We imagine blessing should make us stronger, faster, and more impressive. Jacob was blessed and weakened. He received a new identity and lost his old way of walking. But perhaps the limp was part of the blessing. Jacob had spent his life running from Esau, running from Laban, running from consequences. Now he could not run the same way. He would meet his brother slowly, depending on every painful step. The limp became evidence that control was no longer his only source of safety. The next day, Jacob saw Esau approaching. He bowed to the ground repeatedly. Then Esau ran toward him. Jacob may have expected a weapon. Instead, Esau embraced him. Genesis chapter 33 verse 4 says, "And Esau ran to meet him, and embraced him, and fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept." The meeting Jacob feared did not become the massacre he imagined. The brother he tried to manipulate had become someone he could only meet honestly. Jacob did not control the outcome. He entered it, changed. That is the uplifting heart of this story. Sometimes the answer to fear is not gaining enough control to guarantee safety. Sometimes the answer is becoming someone who can face the moment without hiding. Jacob prayed for deliverance from Esau. But before meeting Esau, Jacob encountered God. The external problem mattered, but the deeper transformation happened in the night. Many of us want God to change the person coming toward us. Change the boss, change the spouse, change the financial reality, change the diagnosis, change the future. And sometimes those circumstances do change. But sometimes the first miracle is that we become different before morning, more honest, less controlling, willing to face what we avoided, able to admit our name, able to cling instead of perform. The night may leave a limp. There are experiences we do not simply walk away from untouched. Grief changes the pace of a person. Failure can make us more careful. Recovery leaves reminders. Survival can reshape how we move through the world. But a limp is not proof that you lost. Jacob limped because he encountered something greater than himself and survived. The wound became evidence of transformation. So perhaps you are wrestling through a long night. You do not know what tomorrow's meeting will bring. You have planned everything you know how to plan. You prayed. You divided the camps. You sent gifts ahead. And now there is nothing left but you, the darkness, and the truth. Do not waste that place. Tell the truth about your name. Release the disguise. Stop pretending strength you do not have. You may not leave the night untouched, but you can leave it changed. Jacob entered alone, afraid and desperate to control the morning. He left with a new name, a blessing, a limp, and enough courage to face his brother. The sun rose on him while he was still hurting. That is hope. Morning does not always arrive after every wound disappears. Sometimes morning arrives while we are still limping, and we move toward it anyway.